I quit my dream job on a Tuesday afternoon, and honestly, it felt like the best and worst decision of my life. There I was, sitting at my desk, pretending to look busy while my heart was doing that weird jitterbug thing you do when you're about to make a huge mistake or the best move ever. I stared at the screen for a solid minute before hitting send on my resignation email. And just like that, the weight of it hit me. How do you know when a fresh start is actually heading for a dead end? Here's the thing that makes my story even weirder. The company I worked for had this unspoken rule about smiles. No, seriously, happy faces were mandatory. Every meeting, every morning briefing, you had to flash what they called the approved expression, which hovered somewhere between enthusiastic and mildly caffeinated. Not a single unhappy thought allowed within the office walls. It was like working in an amusement park designed by people who misunderstood human emotions. I landed that job after what felt like forever, the kind of grind that makes you question your life choices during every 5-minute coffee break. I'd spent years bouncing between gigs, freelance gigs, part-time roles that barely paid for rent, and that endless parade of "we'll keep your resume on file" rejections. So when the email finally popped up inviting me for an interview at Bright Vista, a mid-sized tech firm promising innovation, impact, and growth, I felt like I'd just struck gold buried under a mountain of emails. Jamie, my best friend since college, was practically jumping up and down with excitement for me, but she was also the voice of reason. "Promise me you won't let them chew you up and spit you out," she said over pizza one night as I spilled every detail about company culture and job perks. Jamie's cautious heart was a sharp contrast to my starry-eyed optimism. She had this way of really seeing things, kind of like a human lie detector with earbuds. Mr. Clark was the kind of boss who made you second-guess your own thoughts just by raising an eyebrow. Picture a tall guy with perpetually slicked-back hair and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, like he had a secret he wasn't sharing, but made you feel like you were close to uncovering it. He was demanding, precise, and delivered critiques like they were dished out in a game show, fast, sharp, and often unexpected. Then there was Sophie, my cubicle neighbor and unofficial jester of Bright Vista. Sophie's hair was a swirl of colors that could rival a carnival, and her jokes were the kind that made you laugh the moment you realized they were slightly inappropriate for work. She was the reason I didn't completely lose my mind during those first rough weeks. Sophie had this odd knack for lightening even the most grim brainstorms with a perfectly timed sarcastic comment or a ridiculous meme shared during lunch breaks. At first, everything felt exhilarating. The new badge at the lobby scanner, the sliding glass doors that whooshed open like I was stepping into a sci-fi movie, the buzz of creativity mixed with caffeine in the air. But excitement has a sneaky way of peeling off like old wallpaper when the reality of endless meetings, last-minute deadlines, and urgent tasks that turned into 5-hour marathons hit me like a tidal wave. Mr. Clark's high expectations weren't just a rumor, they became my daily workout. I caught myself rehearsing answers to questions that hadn't even been asked yet, and triple-checking emails before sending because the man raised eyebrows like they were an Olympic sport. Our few one-on-one meetings felt less like conversations and more like exams where the rules kept changing mid-question. Yet, Sophie was my lifeline. One day, after a particularly brutal review, I slumped into our shared break room, and before I could say a word, she slid a cup of coffee my way. "If Clark were a movie villain, he'd be the kind that gives the evil laugh just a little too late," she said, grinning like she'd just uncovered the secret to office survival. Those moments of levity became my silent rebellion against the stress creeping in. But the breaking point? It wasn't a grand explosion or dramatic showdown. It was a Tuesday afternoon with a mountain of unfinished reports and a surprise last-minute project that needed to be top priority by end of day. I sat at my desk, blinking at the jagged teeth of the task list, when I realized this wasn't what I'd signed up for. The promises of meaningful work and creative freedom felt like hollow echoes in a room full of deadlines and forced smiles. I could feel that jitterbug in my chest again, but this time it wasn't nervous excitement. It was exhaustion. That email, my resignation, was the first real taste of freedom I'd had in months. I couldn't predict what came next, but the moment I clicked send, I knew I was stepping off a path I thought was golden and maybe walking straight into a new kind of mess. And somehow, that felt necessary. Landing that job at Bright Vista wasn't luck. It was a saga of perseverance peppered with late nights, endless rejections, and a stubborn refusal to give up. I remember pacing my tiny apartment, phone wedged between shoulder and ear, pitching myself for every kind of role they had open, trying to sound both confident and humble. Two tones I was still awkwardly mastering. When they finally called me back for an interview, I felt like a kid who had just found a hidden door in the classroom wall, equal parts excitement and disbelief. That night, over a crusty slice of pepperoni pizza with Jamie, I laid out every little detail I could scrape together about the company and the position. She was all grins, practically vibrating with enthusiasm, but her words stuck with me. "Just promise me something," she said seriously, shoving a slice into her mouth. "Don't let those corporate vultures turn you into some buzzword-spewing robot. You're better than that." I laughed and waved her off, like I always did when she got all protective. But Jamie knew me better than anyone. She was the friend who could spot the cloud behind the bright blue sky, even when I was too busy daydreaming to notice it myself. Walking into Bright Vista felt like stepping through a portal. The lobby had that sleek, polished vibe, the kind designed to impress visiting clients and make you feel like you belonged, even if you weren't entirely sure how you fit yet. The sliding doors whooshed open, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee mixed with something faintly metallic hit me all at once. The hum of keyboards and quiet chatter filled the background as I found my cubicle, still shiny and new-looking, unmarked by the chaos that I suspected would come. Mr. Clark was already pacing nearby when I sat down, tall, sharp in a suit that probably cost more than my rent, and with that forced smile that made me question whether he actually liked me or just tolerated my existence. His eyes zeroed in like laser beams whenever he spoke, and his expectations were part motivational speech, part threat. "We're here to make waves. No room for slackers," he said during the onboarding, voice low but firm, scanning the room like he was marking off player stats. I could almost see the checklist running through his mind. Who's going to rise? Who's going to fold? And then there was Sophie. If Mr. Clark was the office hawk, Sophie was the clown with a slingshot, ready to bombard the day with mischief and laughter. Her hair looked like a festival of rainbow confetti, and she wore sneakers that screamed louder than most people's voices. On my first day, she sidled up to my desk, plucked a goofy sticker from her collection, and slapped it on my monitor, a smiling avocado wearing sunglasses. "You'll need this for all the stressful emails," she said with a wink. From that moment, Sophie became my unofficial lifeline. When deadlines snarled my calendar, she'd pop up with nonsense gifs and sarcastic commentary that cracked through the tension. Like the morning I accidentally hit reply, all on a snarky message about Mr. Clark's latest email. Sophie didn't even flinch. Instead, she sent me a meme of a cat wearing a judge's wig and captioned it, "Court is now in session." The days started off with that new job. Adrenaline rush. I'd show up early, organize my desk obsessively, and volunteer for every assignment, feeling like a golden child riding a wave of opportunity. But as the weeks filtered through, that energy began to fracture. The urgent projects arrived like clockwork at 4 p.m., turning planned evenings into sprints to finish what I promised would be quick tasks. Meetings piled around the clock like uninvited guests, rerouting my focus until there was nothing left but a blur of action items and glances at the clock. Mr. Clark's meetings, in particular, were a special kind of torture. One afternoon, I remember sitting across from him, trying not to scramble for words like a novice actor forgetting lines mid-scene. "Your last report was acceptable," he said, voice sharp but measured. "But I expected more. I don't want good enough. I want exceptional. Understand?" I nodded quickly, nearly choking on the disbelief. "Yes, absolutely." He raised an eyebrow, that signature Clark move. "Good, because I don't settle for anything less. Neither should you." Walking back to my desk, I felt like I was trudging through quicksand. Was I really cut out for this? Every bit of self-assurance started unraveling in the wake of his gaze. I found myself double-checking everything I did, second-guessing emails, and waking up with anxiety dreams about accidentally clicking send on a wrong file. But moments with Sophie kept me tethered to sanity. During one particularly brutal week after Mr. Slade, a brutal week after Mr. Say, Clark flung a last-minute revision at me with an almost gleeful glare. I sank into our shared break room, the weight of it all pressing down like a sumo wrestler on my chest. Sophie slid a steaming cup of coffee across the table without a word, then broke the silence with, "If Clark's a movie villain, he's definitely the one who becomes evil 3 minutes too late. Like, you think he's going to rub his hands together menacingly, but he just sighs instead, and it's kind of sad." I laughed. A genuine burst that was more relief than amusement, and the tension loosened for a few precious moments. Those small pockets of humor made the endless stress a little less suffocating, but they were also a reminder of how much weight I was carrying. Then one Tuesday, the kind where the sky can't decide if it's raining or sunny, the breaking point arrived like a thief in the night. My inbox exploded with emails from multiple departments demanding updates on reports I hadn't started, revisions on projects I barely understood, and a surprise emergency initiative that needed my attention immediately. The clock was ticking toward 5 p.m., that magic hour when I was supposed to clock out, but no one at Bright Vista seemed to know how to leave on time. I sat back in my chair, blinking at the colorful chaos glaring from my screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, heart racing, and for the first time, the jittery excitement I felt when I started this whole journey was gone. Instead, there was this deep exhaustion, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you question every choice. Leaning back, I glanced over at Sophie's desk. She caught my eye and gave a small shrug, a silent, "I feel you," that didn't need words. In that moment, it dawned on me that the shiny promise of innovation and growth was maybe just a polished mask over the same old grind. And somewhere beneath all the emails, meetings, and forced smiles, I was starting to lose not just my enthusiasm, but a bit of myself too. The first couple of weeks felt like a roller coaster, and not the fun kind that makes you scream and laugh, more like one with those endless loops that leave your stomach in your throat. Except I wasn't even sure if I was screaming or crying. I arrived early most mornings, heart thudding like I was about to sprint a race, filled with this buzz of hope and adrenaline. The new job energy was real, and I wore it like a shield. But the shield started to chip almost immediately. Tasks that seemed straightforward on paper turned into a fateful rabbit hole. What started as a simple report quickly ballooned into multiple versions, each with more footnotes than a novel, because Mr. Clark wanted clarity, precision, and personality. Personality in a report? I wasn't sure if he wanted numbers or a TED Talk. I'd stay late piecing everything together, staring at the screen until the numbers blurred into gibberish. Mr. Clark, a walking spreadsheet with a scowl, was no help. There was a particular day etched into my memory. I had just submitted what I thought was a solid draft, and he summoned me to his glass-walled office. It felt less like a meeting and more like being called up in front of the principal. He tilted his head, fingers steepled, and said, "I expected more nuance. This feels mechanical." I blinked. "Could you clarify?" His eyebrows shot up like I was asking him for the secret recipe to happiness. "You know the difference. I want insight, innovation, dig deeper." That meeting didn't end with a simple sense of, "Fix this." It hung over me, a shadow that turned every subsequent email into a trial by fire. I became obsessed with finding the perfect way to present my ideas, second-guessing every word as if it could make or break my career. Self-doubt moved in and made itself quite comfortable. Then there was Sophie, the rainbow-haired resistor to the madness. She had this quirky way of turning the absurdity of the office into comedy gold. One gray Wednesday, after a brutal team meeting where Mr. Amber Clark laid out a week's worth of impossible deadlines, I found myself parked in the break room, completely deflated. Sophie plopped down beside me with a carton of ice cream and a grin that hinted she was plotting some mischief. "You're not getting through this without a little rebellion," she said, brandishing a spoon like a weapon. "Here's the plan. For every eye-roll-worthy email, we respond only in memes, kill 'em with cat gifs." I laughed, astonishing myself with how much I needed that absurdity. Suddenly, the office was a little less like a cold fortress. Our little alliance gave me a lifeline. On days when Clark's critiques were especially brutal, like the time he called the presentation uninspired, and suggested I find the soul of the data, Sophie was there, ready with a fresh batch of sarcasm and the best bad puns. She turned the tedious into tiny acts of rebellion, reminding me not to take it all so seriously. Sort of. But the pressure kept piling up. The glowing promise of innovation seemed buried under urgent projects that appeared with no warning, and meetings that stretched like marathon sessions designed to suck the life out of you, one agenda item at a time. I could feel the smile I'd practiced every morning while standing in front of the mirror fading, replaced by tight corners and quiet frustration. Then it happened. The breaking point arrived not with drama, but a whisper of exhaustion. It was one of those days where the city outside was drizzling, the kind of rain that seeps through your coat and chills your bones. My inbox was an assault course, no fewer than 5 emails flagged as immediate, while Slack buzzed with frantic messages about an emergency initiative nobody planned ahead for, but suddenly needed all hands on deck. I sat there, surrounded by a growing mountain of half-finished reports, snack wrappers, and sticky notes with to-do items that just kept multiplying like rabbits. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, the cursor blinking back like a metronome counting down to my collapse. The jittery excitement from those first days had curdled into a thick knot of fatigue. somewhere between the 10 tabs open on my browser and Sophie's whispered joking encouragement. We're just emergency responders in a disaster of deadlines. I realized I couldn't keep pretending. That spark I'd brought with me had dimmed, buried beneath exhaustion and pressure. It wasn't a grand epiphany, no explosive confrontation or cinematic showdown, just a quiet moment leaning back in my chair, staring blankly at the screen, feeling like I was drowning in the gloss of promises and the starkness of reality. And that quiet moment, that breath of clarity, was exactly when I decided something had to change. Quitting that job felt like stepping off a cliff blindfolded, and yet somehow it turned out to be exactly what I needed. I remember the relief washing over me as I closed my laptop for the last time, the usual hum of emails and chat notifications replaced by an almost deafening silence. No more forced smiles, no more chasing impossible deadlines, no more trying to decode Mr. Clark's eyebrow language or dodge surprise meetings sprung out of nowhere. It was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. Suddenly, I had space to breathe, to think, and maybe even to figure out who I was beyond the endless string of urgent tags and productivity targets. Without the daily grind pressing down, I realized how much I'd lost sight of myself in that swirl of exceptional expectations and canned enthusiasm. In the days that followed, Jamie was my rock. Over endless coffee runs and dubious attempts at cooking, she listened without judgment as I unpacked every detail, every moment of doubt and frustration. "You did what a lot of people only dream about," she said one evening, eyes bright. "You chose you." She wasn't trying to sugarcoat anything, just reminding me that it's okay to step away from something that doesn't fit anymore, even if it looked perfect from the outside. And Sophie? Well, Sophie was riding her own waves, but she reached out too, sending texts packed with those terrible office memes and check-ins that felt like a life preserver. One day, she dropped off a small potted plant on my doorstep, insisting I needed some antidote to corporate gray. It sat on my windowsill, a little patch of green stubbornness reminding me that growth often happens in unexpected places. Looking back, I think the biggest lesson was about expectations versus reality, how the dream job image is often just a highlight reel edited to perfection. Bright Vista promised innovation, impact, and growth. But what it gave me was constant pressure masked behind a mandatory smile and a job that sucked the spark out of my mornings. I don't regret those months, not entirely because they showed me what I really wanted, a life where work didn't feel like a fight or a performance. It took courage to admit when something isn't right, especially when you've clawed your way to that ideal spot. But sometimes the best decision you can make isn't about holding on tighter, it's about letting go. I'm not saying quitting is the answer for everyone. Heck, some days I still wonder if I jumped too soon or if I should have tried harder to fit in. But in that messy, unpredictable space afterward, I found something more valuable than any job title or paycheck. I found a little bit of my own voice again. And honestly, that's worth more than any corporate smile ever could.